Hi everybody, welcome to today's tutorials. This is the first of three. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at some motion tracking. So as I've already said in the session, there's two different kind of flavors of tracking really. You can track the camera, so imagine the camera that's filmed a scene, and you can kind of track the movement of that camera, or at least try and predict where it went, and then you can use that to add assets as though they were being filmed by that camera. Or you can track movement within a particular frame. So this isn't tracking the movement of the camera now, this is tracking an object inside a frame. So try and imagine your camera is locked off on a tripod, it's not moving at all, and an object is moving inside the frame. That's what we're going to be doing today. Okay, so let's jump in. What we're going to do first of all is we're going to bring in our first project asset, which is this xtrack1. I'm going to pick it up and drag it over into our project bin. Hooray! Right then, so what we're going to do is my favorite way of starting a project. If you know you are going to be working within the parameters of the footage you've included, you can click new composition from footage, but I think it's just nice and straightforward. Just grab your clip and drag it down onto this symbol here. This is the new composition symbol, and if you drag it onto that new composition symbol, you'll now get a new composition which is exactly the same duration and exactly the same frame rate as the clip that you started with. Hooray! So you don't have to muck about with trying to work out what frame rate the original video is in and all that sort of thing. You can just make a composition and After Effects will do it all for you. So here's our video. If we press spacebar, we can play it through. And as we can see in this video, we've got quite a basic video of an X moving around on a white background. What we're going to do is we're going to be tracking this. So this is a moving object inside a frame, not the camera itself moving. So this object isn't stationary and the camera is moving around it. The camera is stationary and this object is moving, assuming this was obviously being filmed by a camera. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to find our tracker. Now my tracker is down here. If you can't see your tracker, first of all come up to Window and make sure that tracker is ticked. And if it is ticked, if it isn't, then tick it. And if it is ticked, then what might have happened is it might be hiding behind one of these chevrons here. So keep sort of looking in these different panels until you find your tracker. Okay, and then you can, once you've got your tracker, if you want to put it somewhere else, you can pick it up, you can dock it, like I could dock it there, for example, if I wanted to, like, you know, have that running side by side with my competitor and my VR competitor and stuff like that. But I'm not going to, I'm just going to move it back to there. Okay, because this is just my preferred kind of setup. So within the tracker then, we've got various options. If yours aren't highlighted, it means that you haven't highlighted your clip yet. So each of these will be grayed out because it doesn't know what you want to track yet. So click on your xtrack footage and now these will come live. Okay, these two ones on the right hand side, warp stabilizer and stabilize motion, we'll talk about those another time. Okay. So track camera is the one we're going to be doing next week. That is, as we've said, when you're tracking a moving camera. And what we're going to be doing today is tracking motion within a static frame. Oh, it doesn't have to be a static frame, but we're tracking the motion of an object inside the frame. Okay, so we're going to click track motion. And what we get is this, we're now in the layers panel. So you can see there's a composition here. This is our comp, okay, and we're now in a layer panel, a little bit like working within a pre-composition that we talked about last week. It's not a pre-composition, it's a way of kind of editing a bit of footage inside a composition. Okay, but it's kind of, try and imagine it a bit like that. You've moved into a new space in order to work on this this clip. Okay, so I'm going to zoom into my footage first of all, and here's my tracker. Remember, you zoom by using the scroll wheel on your mouse, or you can expand on your trackpad on your laptop. Now the first thing that people get wrong with motion tracking is they pick up these crosshairs in the middle of the tracker and they think they've got to move that around in order to set their tracker. That is not what we want. Okay, so I'm going to Command Z to undo that. You also don't want to be adjusting these squares yet, so don't click on the squares themselves to adjust that just yet. Okay, you can do, but that's not what we're going to be doing. We need to click in the white space inside these boxes and pick up the whole tracker and move it around. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out. If you zoom out enough, what you'll find is when you click on that space, it becomes magnified. Can you see that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over to my X. Now, if you can't quite see that, remember, hold down spacebar, and then you can move your whole composition around. Okay, and I'm going to pick up my tracker. And that X in the middle, basically what I'm doing with my tracker is I'm saying, right, I'm going to put this X on the pixel that I want you to track. So you don't want to be putting your X on like there, because what's the difference between that particular black pixel and all the other ones around it? It's going to be hard for the tracker to track that. So instead what you're doing is you're picking it up and you're finding a pixel which is going to be easy to find, such as this one in the kind of the junction point between these two X's, okay? And we're saying always look for that pixel, and wherever it goes in every single frame of this video, track it. Like basically write it down effectively, you know, so that we know where that pixel is throughout the whole of the video. All right. And in order to help you find that pixel, we've got two layers of targeting. So we've got this wider layer where it says, look, the first thing to do when you're looking for this pixel is in every single frame, find this big X shape, okay? And then what you do is you narrow into that X shape by looking for this particular shape here. So you want to narrow it down to like, you know, these arms here and that sort of thing. You know, you might give it a little bit of extra by going, look, there's a little bit of white here. Look for this basic shape, and then you'll find this at the center of it, okay? So you've got two layers of targeting then. Well, what After Effects will do is it'll go for every single frame, it'll look for this one first, and it'll go, right, I need to find this big X shape, and then within the X shape I need to look at this specific part of the X, and then I need to look for that specific pixel, okay? So you can do it any way you like. I mean, you could target it on that bit, or you could target it on that bit, or you could even target it on an edge, like so, like that. You know, it really doesn't matter. As long as you get something that you think the tracker is going to be able to work with, then it really doesn't matter what you do. Okay, so I'm going to position mine like that, for example. Now, making sure that my playhead is at the beginning of the clip then, I mean, you can start tracking at the end if you want to and track back. You can even start tracking in the middle, but you're making work for yourself because you'll have to track it one way and then the other. Okay, so I'm going to pull mine back to the start. Okay, now what you've got is two options in terms of tracking. First of all, ignore the rotation and scale. That's the next video. So we're just tracking position for now. And what you're gonna do in this analyze section here, ignore this edit target bit. We're gonna go and come into that in a minute, and the options one we'll talk about in the third video. Okay. So what we're going to do is come down to analyze, and we're going to say, right, I can either analyze the whole thing forward, so play it forward as fast as After Effects can do and track it as best it can, okay? Or I can do it frame by frame, and that means I have to click that button for every single frame that I want to analyze. Now you would use that more for kind of tracks where you're not confident that it's going to be able to find the track all the way through. So what you might do is like later on we're going to be tracking a face, and you might be like, there's points in this where the face moves and the video blurs and the tracker's not going to be able to find this thing, so I'm going to track it forward frame by frame and actually move the tracker onto the point that I want tracked, you know, so you can do it that way. But I'm pretty confident that I think this bold X shape on a white background is going to be pretty easy for it to track, okay? So I'm going to click this button here, which is the Analyze Forward button, and it will track my X, hopefully successfully, and then I'll come back once it's done and we'll talk about what happens next. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So at the moment, it's looking pretty fluid, so I'm not going to go in and adjust any of those because it seems to be working rather well along the line of my X. Seems to be moving nicely. We can look at adjusting individual track points later on in another video, but for now we're going to say, yeah, that's looking pretty good. Hopefully yours looks like that. If not, what you can do is you can zoom into it and you can start to drag these different points. So you can pick that up and you can drag it, you know, so let's take it to that frame, for example. A quick tip for working on a Mac is page up and page down keys are the frame advance keys. So if you want to go frame by frame, page up and page down. If you haven't got page up, page down keys on your Mac, then Command and then the arrow keys will move it along for you. So let's say, for example, that was where our tracker was. Our X was over there. We could pick the tracking point up and move it onto the spot that we wanted, but you know, obviously it's all fine, so we're not going to do that. So there's our track then. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is we've got this tracking data. Effectively, as I said earlier, I was sort of joking, but it's like find out where that pixel was and write that down. Well, that's kind of what After Effects has done. It's written down the position of every single instance of that pixel in all the frames of this video. And now we need to find somewhere to put that data. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to Layer and New and Null Object. So a null object is a clip without any information in it. So it allows us to add things to it effectively. So a bit later on, we're going to be creating null objects and attaching. If we go into effects, we can go into expression controls, and we can add things like layer controls and sliders and drop down menus and all sorts of things to it, which allow us to then manipulate other clips. What we're going to do with this one is we're going to keep it as it is, just null1, okay, and we're going to come over to our tracker and we're going to click edit target. We're going to say null1 because that's the only null we've got. Click OK, and what we're going to do is we're going to send all this tracking data to this null object. So I've edited my target. I'm now going to apply X and Y, because obviously it's not Z dimensions because we're not moving front to back. It's just literally left and right and up and down. So I'm going to click OK. And now here's the red square, which represents our null object. And we can see that that null object is attached to our X. And wherever the X goes, the null goes as well. Great. So what can we do with this? Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to do something very simple first of all. So I'm going to click away from here and I'm going to go into T, which is my text generator, okay? And I'm going to come up to my footage and I'm just going to type track, okay? So what I might do is I might go into that and select a better color. What about red? That'd be nice. What about a nice red? And I'm going to take the font size down and that sort of thing. Okay, that'll do for now. All right. So there's my word. I can go back to my arrow key now, and here's my word. It's a whole new layer called track here, and I can position this wherever I want on the screen. At the moment, the X is moving and the track isn't. And all we need to do is on our track. It doesn't matter, this is the toggle switches and modes button. We haven't covered this one yet. We're going to be using this one a lot, but you can toggle between different modes, but it doesn't matter what mode you're in. You should still be able to see this little spiral, and this is called a pick whip, okay? And what it does is it allows you to attach one clip to another. So I'm going to pick up my pick whip. What I might do is actually just change this to a different color so you can see. So right clicking on that allows me to change it to a different color, so it's not, we haven't got two red clips on the timeline to make it a bit easier for you to see what's going on. I'm going to pick up the pick whip from my track 1 and I can move this around and I can parent it to whatever I want. So I'm going to parent it to this null1. I'm basically saying whatever this null does, you do as well. Okay, so I'm going to click that to there, and now as I play it through, my track will now move with my X. Okay, and the important thing to remember about this is that the track doesn't have to be connected to the X. I can put it wherever I want and it will still move in exactly the same way as the X, because as long as I've parented it to it, it should do exactly what the null object does. Remember, it's not the X that it's moving with, it's the null object which is attached to that. So I can create all sorts of things. I could create another word, I could create, hello, for example, and put that there, and then that doesn't move, but then as I move back I pick up my pick whip and parent that to null1, and now hello will also move in the same way as X. So now I've got this null, I can parent as many things to it as I want. Okay, and I can move this track down to wherever, so I can move it there, and it'll still move. Okay, so the final thing we're just going to do quickly is we're going to just get rid of this X, because I want to explain this process to you, as we're going to be doing it later on with a face, and so it's important to kind of try and understand it first of all before we do it like that. So the final thing we're going to do is we're going to come up to Layer and New and Solid, and this is white, a white background, so obviously we're just going to select a white background, but if it was a particular shade of white, for example, we can select this dropper and just say that color, I want to make it that color. And now there's my white solid. Okay, so I drag that up to the top. Remember that After Effects works just the same as Premiere and Photoshop in that you have a hierarchy within the stack. So whichever clip is on the top of the stack, that's the one you're going to see. So that's why we can't see anything else at the moment. Our white solid is obscuring everything. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my white solid. but I'm going to highlight it to make sure I'm manipulating my white solid even though I can't see it. And now I'm going to pick up my rectangle tool that we used last week, okay? And I'm just going to draw a box around this X, like so. Now, because I had my white solid highlighted, it's now created that mask on the white solid. So if I turn the white solid back on, that mask is now in play. If I turn everything else off, well, probably if I just solo it just to be easier, okay, this is what that solid now looks like. That mask has cut away all the rest of that solid and left me with this bit, okay, which is what I want. So if I now turn that solo off, I can see everything again. Watch what happens when we move it through. Oh, the X comes out from behind the white square. Oh, what are we going to do? Well, hopefully you probably guessed by now what we're going to do. We're just going to pick up the pick whip for that white solid and parent it to our null. And now, wherever the X goes, that white solid will go as well. So now we can just move around, and that tracking mark that we tracked earlier is now vanished. And that's really important, because if you're tracking something like a tracking mark on somebody's face or somebody's hand or something like that, you want to be able to track that, and then you want to be able to get rid of it, because obviously you don't want that track mark to be in your final footage, you know. So what you do is you track it, you attach the things to it, and then finally you take a piece of the footage and you obscure it and track that cover, that bit that you've used to obscure the track, to the null, and lo and behold, you now have objects moving with each other and no track marks visible. Okay, so that's the end of that first video. I hope that sort of all made sense. Hope you've managed to get to this point, and I shall join you in the second video where we're going to be looking at rotation and we're going to be looking at scale. So in our tracker here, that's when, if we track motion, that's where we'll now be clicking on rotation and scale. But we'll do that in the next video. So I shall see you there.